going to do a little bonus section on two-part, or I guess the writing of these second inversion triads. We're still on page 143 right here. In this bottom section, it says realize these figured bases with 4 or 3 voices. Is it, it's like, okay, so what does that mean to realize these figured bases? Well, in these ones above, you are given a baseline chords and figured bass, right? And the melody, and you're adding parts in the middle. Realizing a figured bass is where you just have the bass line and the figures and none of the other parts. And so it's just the next step. You figure out what the chords are from the Roman numerals. Sorry, you figure out what the Roman numerals are, the functions of the chords, given the figured bass that you have here. And you write the melody, and then you fill in the other parts. I guess you could write all the 3 parts at the same time, but okay. I'm just going to go through that with you on one of these, this one right here. If we were face-to-face class, then I would have you do this in class and we would talk about melody writing. But because everybody on their own will write very different melodies and you could make mistakes, it's very hard to say, just go ahead and do this without a little bit of face-to-face work. Next term, there's going to be an opportunity probably for us to meet face-to-face, and at least some. And so we'll address that. We might even take a whack at this next week before term ends. But for right now, we'll just work with this as it is, okay? So I'll go through these steps. I've written it out right here. And the first step is just to understand what the chords are before they were given to us. Now we have the figured bass, and since we know how figured bass works, we can say, well, 2 sharps is B minor or D major, right? But I have these notes here with nothing underneath them, so they're root position notes. This is a D major chord because the root is D, and this will make it major. And the end is D, and this looks like a chord, so 1 and 5. So it looks like we're in A major or D major. Right? And it feels like it's in D major. It's in D major. So I'm going to write D major. And I'm going to make that a 1 chord. And this is a root position chord, so that's a 5 right there. Now, 6-4. Well, that means that this turned into the 5th chord, which means that it's a 1 chord, right? Because this is the 5th of the 1 chord. So this is a 1 chord. And the reason why they put 5-3 here, whereas we didn't before, is to tell you that these figured bass number or notes have resolved like that. And so this is back to a 5 chord, but they want us to know that it's not just 6-4 keeping on. It's gone back to what it would be right there, right? You only write in this if it's necessary, and it has to cancel that out. So there we go. Root position looks like a 6 chord. And then this looks like a third of an E chord, which would be my 2 chord. Okay. This is the 5th of my 1 chord right there. 6-4 means 5th, so 1. And this is the 5-3 again right there, 5. Okay, and then 1 again. And we should go one step further and say, well, this one here is the 6-4 between a root position 5 and a root position 5 where the bass note holds out. That means it's a pedal chord. So we write in pedal, right? And here we're at the cadence point right here. And so we put that all under a bracket and say this is 5, which is why the 2 chord can go to a 1 chord in this case, because it's not a 1 chord, it's 5. Interesting, in this particular example, Koska breaks its own rule, because although the 1-6-4 is on a stronger beat than the 5 chord that follows, that it resolves into, this is a longer chord than that. I guess these are not rules so much as guidelines, and if you break the guidelines, then you get something that sounds a little different, but it's all shades of gray, right? It's how different. And so, actually look at this and I think it's fine. It sounds fine to me. But it would be more typical if it was 1-6-4 for a half note and then 5 for a quarter note. All right. So let's think about how we write. So we've done that step. Now in realizing this, that means now that we have to write in a melody. And we've done this before, but I want to, address it again. So I'm just arpeggiating the chords, right? And then we want to use only chord notes here, right? We want to have generally a smooth line. I should have one sort of high point to it. And we want to avoid parallel fifths and octaves, and also hidden fifths, direct fifths and octaves, right? With their melody. Now, the way we avoid direct and hidden fifths and octaves is to not skip into an octave or a fifth with the bass in the same direction. And the way we avoid parallels is to not double the note and then move to another chord and double the note again. And, you know, we should be thinking about sound and spacing, I think, right here. So let me give you the simplest, dumbest version of this. I'm just going to do this. Do, 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 do. It is a very boring melody. Looks like an alto line, right? But has some merit, because you'll never get parallel octaves. Now remember, this is all just a 5 chord, and the fact this is an octave and an octave and an octave is completely okay, because we're not really changing chords. Also, the notes are not moving. So for parallel octaves to be objectionable, you have to be changing from a chord to another real different chord. And the notes have to move from one set of pitches to another. That doesn't happen, okay? But, you know, we get our doubled fifth right there, right? We get to smooth everything. The inside voices are going to move, but that's going to be fine. And then, you know, we have enough space in between. Now, what we can't do is go up to the B, because that, see that right there? That's going up to the B, and we would parallel octaves. Besides, when we want to go from 5 to 6, generally we want to go in the opposite direction anyways. So that means we're coming down, right? So I'm using my theory of methods to know that that's going to work, right? So we're like, right? Seems pretty good, right? And I do want a high point. So, you know, I'm going to voice exchange here, I think. Bum, 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 bum. Right? Because this is an EGB chord right here. Right? This is a B, D. Oh, I think I've got a wrong note here. My bad. That's F sharp, because this is a 6 chord right here. Still going to work out just fine though, right? It's going to be right, and now we can go. I think that's what we're going to do. So we're going to make a big jump here, and hopefully there's enough space in here still for the chords. We'll find out. Okay, but it sounds good to me, right? Like that. All right, and let's just do a check. Oblique, 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 opposite motion, and it didn't start, well, this is a fifth, but this is not a fifth right here, right? So we couldn't have a fifth and a fifth. Step up, go back down, so no parallel anythings or hidden anythings there, right? And then resolve down by step, oblique, and then we're good, we're good. And I like the sound. It's got a high point and a nice cadence, and it's smooth and singable. You might be like, that's a little odd sounding, but you're not hearing the rest of the chord there. And given the way that I wrote this to begin with, this is the only real way to go. I can't go up, right, to there. So it's okay. Bum, 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 yum, bum, bum, bum. It's fine. Could also have gone bum, 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 bum. Would have been fine as well, but we may end up moving these up. We'll see. And now we write in the inner parts. Okay. Let me just, you know, point out that these here, this particular idiom, we're not even worried about this chord. The notes are going to, because it's a pedal chord, are going to go up by step into these notes right there, and then down by step again. That's the nature of a pedal chord right there. So this is going to look like this right here. Okay. So there's my fourth above the bass note right there, and there's my sixth above the bass note, and they're going to come down like that, because 6 will go to 5, 4 will go to 3, like that, and they'll have started there to begin with, because that's the nature of the pedal chord, right? The doubled note, the bass note, they hold steady, and the notes that would go up to the 6 and the 4 come back down like that. Okay, and that's perfectly fine. It's going to sound just fine. Yeah. So let's smith backwards or fit in our first chord right here. Well, if you want a double root, then you're going to have to go with the double root with the D right there and the F sharp right there. If you want, you could put the A right there and have them leap up. It's kind of up to you, right? But probably the F sharp is going to be right there. Because if we put the F sharp way down here, then they have to jump from an F sharp up to a C sharp. Seems pretty mean to do, right? I guess you could put the D right there. If you want this note to be on the D, then you have to put the F sharp there because you got to have a root and a third. I don't think that's what we want. You can put your tenor note here or there, one of those two, right? If you want to put it up high to begin with, right, then it's harder for them to start on, right? But it's easier for them to sing the line, right? Or if you put them down below, they get a more interesting line. It's easier to, right? I like that better. Right? Yeah, seems okay. All right, now remember 5 going up to 6. Everything's going to move in the opposite direction because step, we have the option of taking T and bringing it up to do. But given the space that we have here, I don't think we're going to do that. I think we're just going to end up like that right there. And then this guy's going to come down to the D just for spacing, right? So now we are, and then down to here. Yeah. And then when we open up to here, we have some room. And I think the E is going to happen right there. And this guy's just going to stay on the oblique, right? Let's check ourselves from here. We went double note to a fifth, so that's fine. And we have a root in our fifth right there, but they end up being in a third, so that's fine right there. When we move from here to here, our doubled note splits into 2 different notes and it's oblique motion, so it's fine. Our root and our fifth are right here. The root and fifth, that's the bass, we already know is good, right? Became a third, and this oblique motion means when it leaps into the octave, it's okay too, because it was obliquely done there. This is not a hidden octave because this is not moving in the same direction and it's not the bass note, okay? All right, going to our 164. We want to double the A, right? And there we are right there. There's no room for it anywhere else, and this is pretty typical, right? And then that'll be my D right there. So complete triad, double fifth, right? And then as I resolve down, stays doubled. The 6 goes to the 5 and the 4 goes to the 3. The F sharp is a 6th above my bass note and it goes to the 5th above the bass note. So that's good right there. My 4 is the D above the bass note right there. And it's going to come down to there. And this is not parallel or consecutive octaves because it's the same chord and the notes do not move. I'm going to let you know that typically when we write this, honestly, you'll see the bass line drop down to there and the tenor line stay there like that more often. Just because it gives a different texture there. It's not easy to hear this on the piano because you don't hear this twice in the, it's easier to hear that when you drop the octave in the bass, right? But in real life, if you have 2 people or 2 sections singing unison there, it will be stronger than what you'd hear on the piano. So that's fine. And then we just resolve the 5 chord here, which is root to root. And looks like it's going to be, because this is a re-do situation, they know that this is going to not work as common tone. So it's going to be not common tone. Everything moves in the same direction to the next chord tone. So this is coming down to that A. Like that. Now, there are some exceptions to this because this is our last chord right there, and it's acceptable to have a root third. You could be like this, where the alto goes up, the tenors still go down like that, the basses are still there, and you could have 3 roots and a third, right? And both are acceptable, and you'll find both. I'm going to flip the octave in the bass line in the second to last measure so you can hear it, right? So we could go to all of them like that. That's the first one. Or if you like not having the altos go down like that, you want to just hear it cleaner, you could be like, and now this is the second alternative, right? It's completely acceptable. Sounds better than that because the altos and the sopranos will be singing the D together. You don't lose that much by not having the A there. It's up to you. You can do it or not do it if you want. Okay. So realizing a figured bass is like the other exercises, except no chords are given to you, just the figured bass is given to you. So you have to figure that out, right? Then you have to supply your melody, which is a complicated step because it has to aesthetically please you and sound good and be singable. It can't cause outer voice, parallel fifths and octaves, hidden direct fifth octaves, those kind of things, or even diminished or unequal fifths would be bad too. And then you have to fill in the inner parts. Complicated in this case because we have 6/4 chords. We have to find them, label them, bracket them, and then resolve them in and out correctly as well. But that's how we do it. I'm not going to give you an exercise right away for this, but we will get to it where you do some realizing your own figured basses too. But hopefully that was useful and gives you an idea of where we are now and eventually where we need to be in terms of fluency in writing.